Yes,
Hi, Jean. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I had another question regarding Mary. Um, I believe that in the course of St. John, you showed us how for him to believe means to be united with Christ. Um, so then, when we ask Mary to believe for us, doesn't that mean that we ask her to do something that she's already doing? She's already united to him.
Okay, so let me, if you don't mind, piece the question right now, because there are different elements combined, and then maybe it could unfold and lead us to other practical aspects. First and foremost, just to clarify the issue of St. John. When we studied the St. John's Gospel a few years ago, I tried to show that he structured his gospel in order to allow us to go through a journey of growth. You remember the 6 signs plus one is being the cross itself. So these 6 signs are steps of purification, and they are supposed to lead us to, as he says in his first conclusion, which is chapter 20, verse 30 and 31, where he says, all these things has been written, all these signs have been presented to you in order to lead you, yes, to believe that Jesus is the Christ, and believing, then you receive the life, eternal life, or divine life. Now, as you see, the act of faith, to believe, and a final reality, as he describes it, are 2 different things. You have acts of faith in his gospel, and for now I'm talking just about St. John, but it's valid for everything else, the general teaching, I would say, Christian teaching. You have acts of faith from the beginning. You open the first pages of the gospel, you have that some believed in him, etc. But of course, this belief, this level of faith, of growth, is completely different from a greater one, which in his eyes is when he puts us in front of the cross and Jesus' side is opened, and then we access through this gate to his heaven, and heaven is the divinity of Jesus, and by accessing the source of everything, the source of all the water and the sacraments, and I mean the Holy Spirit is Jesus' divinity, so deep in his heart, and this opening in his side, then we have everything, you see. So that's his idea. But in order to reach the fullness of belief, of faith, there are stages. So it's important, I think, to distinguish both. Faith is growing in his eyes, and it goes through different stages of purification. Each sign of the 6 signs he presents are stages of growth of this faith. Now, in this sense, I think we should distinguish. Of course, he doesn't use these expressions, but it's implicit in his teaching. The difference, the distinction between acts and, I would say, a higher level, a fuller level of faith. You may call it union, as you called, and I did call it in the during the course, in order to help you understand, but also a state, if you want. But this can only be said, I would say, centuries after, when we understood better that there are stages in the growth of spiritual life. We have them with greater clarity now, since, say, I don't know, the Middle Ages and the late Middle Ages, with John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, but a bit before also we had them. I'm not saying we didn't have them, but they're clearer. So we understand that you have acts, you have growth, and then you reach a certain stage a certain, I would say, but don't get it wrong, a certain stable state where there is a continuous union. But there is no stable ever, in the sense that within that stable state, there is growth. There is never, it's not possible to conceive love without growth, divine love, charity without growth. So if somebody is united to Jesus, this means that he or she has full access to Jesus. I'm talking here spiritual marriage or union of love, as is described by Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, at least. It means that the person has fuller access, is united really, is very close, is purified, it's finished already, but even from the previous stage before the initial engagement, spiritual engagement. And this state, this full access to Jesus, contains in itself perpetual growth, continuous growth. But it's not comparable. It's just you have a different quality here, where I would say the power is even more, it goes beyond even exponential. Okay, exponential. So yeah, so this is what I would say just to start. Now, going back to the second part of your question, because you are drawing from different parts. You are drawing from St. John's course, you are drawing from some teaching on Our Lady, the teaching I gave on Our Lady, which says that at a certain point in our spiritual growth, we feel the necessity to go through a shift between a more human way of enacting our act of faith to a more divine way, more from God way doing the act of faith. So there is an intervention of God in our life that takes us from that lower quality of act of faith, a little bit like a car that is trying to fly. So the car will go, say, I don't know, 300 kilometers per hour, but still it will never fly. And there is a moment where God sees, okay, the car is doing its utmost, what is the maximum the car can do. Then he finds that this is the right time to intervene, and then he gives wings to this car, and the car starts to, like the takeoff of a true plane. No, at a certain point you go very quick, very fast, and then you take off. Why? Because the potence lifts the wings, and then the entire plane. So yeah, so compare it this way, like you can't fly and then suddenly you start to fly with God's wings. So God intervenes, and I'm teaching here just John of the Cross, intervenes to give these wings so the person can fly. Now, at this junction, we have clearer understanding, especially through Father Marie Eugene, Blessed Father Marie Eugene, and others, of a new discovery, if you want, of the place of Our Lady in our spiritual life. So we move on to something more vital in our recourse to Our Lady, in the sense, as you said it, and I explained it before in other moments, that this faith, this pure faith that St. John of the Cross describes and praises throughout his works, especially second book of Ascent of Mount Carmel, he talks about a different quality of faith. He teaches us how to make an act of faith. That faith then becomes Mary's faith. So there is like a transplant. I don't know, some people have this operation, surgery, they remove an organ and then you have another organ instead. And I think that this change here, very similar to a transplant, is needed. And the more decisive we take that path, in a more decisive way we take that path, the better it is, because we speed up the shift Otherwise, we delay and we may suffer even more. So by adopting Mary's capacity instead of my capacity, I realized that shift. Hence, the advice to put into practice that, the advice I gave in other courses to say, for instance, Jesus, I love you, or I trust in you, or I believe in you, not with my capacity, but with Mary's capacity. So, or said in another way, I'm asking Mary to believe for me or to love for me. But who is Mary and where is Mary? The Mary we are talking here, or the understanding of her we have here, is a person who is totally united with Jesus right now. She has that perfect full access to Jesus. There is no purer way, better way, more perfect, more divine way to love, to know and love Jesus than the way that Mary has. So they are united. So when we talk Mary, we need to remember that she's like constantly hugging and being hugged by Jesus. Of course, hugging is a poor expression to say something very deep. Okay, so they are in that constant state. She has that full access. I don't have it yet. But what am I doing? I'm saying, Jesus, I don't want to use my car that doesn't fly. I want to use the wings or the rocket that you give me. And it's Mary's way to love Jesus. So when I say, for instance, Mary, please love Jesus for me, it's my act, of course, but it's my choice to change the modality or the means. I'm not doing it with my car, I'm doing it with the rocket. You see? Now, how do you do that? I'm getting closer to a practical way. You have to find your own way, and the simpler the way, the better it is. You don't have to complicate your life. God is simple and knows what you want. But you need to find a way, your own way to say it. Because what is a spiritual act? Try to analyze it. It has, when you say it physically, imagine you're alone in your room and you speak, so there's a bit of an audible voice there. You say, Jesus, I love you with Mary's heart. Okay. So you are in your room and you hear yourself, and Jesus, of course, hears you. But imagine at a certain point, you're not expressing it with your voice. So it's silent, but it's real. It's a real act, no? So you are, imagine even in the mass or in the church, so you can't speak loudly out of respect for people who are around you. So, but you still can do it. So you see here, we don't have the physical effort, too much of a physical effort. It's just the mind and the will are using, of course, the brain, because we are aware, we are awake, are doing this act. Now, you need to find your own way. I know you read it when you read the story of different saints. Some of them find their own way. Some of them said, okay, I touch my heart. I was reading this few days ago. Founder of a small order in France in the 19th century, the beginning of 19th century. He used to do this, and it was like a sign, an agreement, that whenever he does that, it meant that he's doing this thing. So that's a way. And here we are talking about an act. Okay, we're doing an act. Now, let me take other examples, because it's important to see the variety of examples, because each one for us is unique, and where we are at right now is unique also. So let me take another example. I was reading this also recently. The superior of Padre Pio, when they asked him how many, because he used to recite the rosary a lot. How he did it, God only knows. We can't know that, but he was reciting it. I would rather think, according to moral contemplative way, it's like he's not meditating a mystery, but he's just saying the rosary. So it's part of you that is given to Mary. You see how I translated that? It's part of you that is given It's like when you have a, how do you call this?
Funnel.
Entonnoir. The funnel,
Funnel.
Huh?
Funnel.
Funnel. Sorry. So you have a funnel, and then you pour things, and then it goes through this little conduit in the bottom. So your being is totally funneled, is totally poured through these acts. So he used to say the rosary many times a day. He was like a, you know, you understand what I mean. And one day his superior asked him, how many rosaries did you say today, Father Pio? He said, oh, I can't lie to my superior. So he had to say the truth. And he said 34. Of course, for us, it's totally crazy. We don't know how he does it. But what does it mean? It means that this act I'm talking about of putting yourself through this funnel, your energy, your being here and now, right now, is an opportunity to love. Being right now, here, alive, is an opportunity to love. So I can use it. By right now, we are talking, I can do it. Nobody can stop you from doing it, even though we are talking. The more one does it, the more it becomes easier to do. So I'm just loving. I love God. I love Jesus, and but I'm giving myself to Mary, and automatically she unites me with Jesus. So what does it mean to say 35 at a certain point in the day? Because it wasn't necessarily at midnight when he asked him the question. So probably he still had a few hours left in his day. So what does it mean, 34 rosaries, just to understand the soul of Father Pio? I think it's each Hail Mary is like this. It's like an act. It's like he's being pushed through the funnel. So these are acts. Each Hail Mary is an act. Now we need to be careful because it's not the material aspect of it. So now whoever hears this video and is full of commitment and passion and wants to do it, so we start to say 34 rosaries a day. No. It's rather closer to the prayer of the heart, which is I am giving myself, but in the form here of a Hail Mary. Okay. Now, two more examples. Saint Therese of the Child Jesus. As a nun, she has to recite the office. So I'm taking examples from daily life to see how can this happen, or at least how it did happen through the saints, because we learn from the saints. As a nun, you have to, as many, I mean, deacons, consecrated people, priests, have to recite the divine office. We can also recite the divine office. I mean, we are invited to, if we can, but it's a matter of also managing time. The divine office in her time was in Latin. And then one of the sisters asked her, dare to ask her, how do you pray? She said, I imagine myself in an island, small island on a rock in the middle of the sea. And I am with my beloved, Jesus. And how do you do it? In another moment, they asked her, what do you do? How do you pray? She said, I love him. It's an act. It's not I love him like I'm in love with somebody. So that's a state, no? I met somebody and then I'm very happy with this person. So people ask me, how are you doing? You say, oh, I love this person, or I'm in love. And it's like a state. No, I love him means I am performing an act of love. How do you pray? What do you say? She said, I don't say anything. I love him. So this is where we are supposed to go, which is reach that simplicity, removing all the extra bits that are not the sense of this act of gift of myself, pouring myself, pushing myself through the funnel, etc. Now, Another example, and I will then come back to your question. But here it's slightly different in the sense that Therese said, okay, but I need to pray for other people as well. And then how can I pray for other people? It would be too long for me to know how to enumerate all the needs of each person, etc. And God gave me, I am a simple person, not simple-minded, but simple in the simplicity. He gives to the children or simple person easy and simple means. And he taught me this verse of the Bible, which is, draw me and we will run. Draw me, we will run. Taken from the canticle, Song of Songs of Solomon, from the Old Testament. And she says, when I say draw me, all the people I'm supposed to pray for will follow. God attaches them to me and then we follow. But let us stop at draw me, which is her prayer. So the Hail Mary, or the act we are trying to understand, etc., became for her, draw me. But of course, for her, Mary is there. She can never exclude Mary. She's totally possessed by Mary, no? So when she says draw me, it's in the context of Mary. When she does her act of oblation, she says, I surrender, I give, I deposit my act of this act in the hands of Mary, which means everything in her life, it's automatically done, goes through the hands of Mary, in the sense that Mary has a better way to deal with Jesus and she knows better, okay? So you see, what I'm trying to say is what? One small sentence at a certain moment in my simplification process of prayer, you see, simplification process. In the beginning, it's a long prayer, and then it's a shorter prayer, and then it's a Hail Mary, and then it's this, and then it's that, and then becomes, and then I can, by the grace of God, reach that simplicity of the movement that can be done. So she says, draw me. In her case, I'm not saying whoever watched the video has to do it this way. No, you have to understand the spirit of it, what is behind it. Now, drawing even now I move on. Drawing closer to the question. How can I be then doing, I think you were asking this, maybe not now, but before. You said, what was your...
How could you do this act continually?
Exactly. How can I do this act continually? First, as I said, it's not a matter of materialistic numbers. I'm counting. Like, for instance, what could happen when we read the Russian Pilgrim. I don't know the exact title in English, but it's about the Jesus prayer. And it's a very beautiful text where you see a story, no, of a man who wants to reach that continuous state of prayer. But when you read the story, it's a bit of a battle of numbers, performance, if you want, like or the Olympics. He starts to repeat and repeat and repeat and counts how many thousand times he said, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me. The temptation is to sort of think that it's just by the pure power of repeating the prayer that we will enter in a constant state of continuous offering of myself. I think a bit of humility and better understanding is needed here. Yes, we can do something, and even we can enter in this sort of competition of numbers due to our fervor or desire to really reach that state. But we need to be careful because it's a matter of growth. I can only do a certain, it's not the amount, it's a certain quality in the act. I can only do that. St. John of the Cross in one of the witnesses of his process of beatification and canonization, called Father Elijah of the Martyrs. Elijah of the Martyrs. This is his name. A religious name, of course. He says that St. John of the Cross, during his lifetime, used to teach the anagogical act, which is ejaculatories, we call ejaculations, we call them now, which is like sending an arrow prayer to God. And he says that in the beginning of our spiritual life, think of the novices, for instance, in religious life, he says it's very difficult to do this act. But the more there is, you have spiritual growth, the more the real virtue growth, the more charity and the love of God and the love of our neighbor, but in a divine way, grows, the easier it becomes. So you have to bear this in mind, because my desire and my material repetition cannot override my state of transformation or my level or degree of transformation. So we can only do a certain amount, not more. You see what I'm trying to say? Okay. So my answer is, yeah, we want to have this continuous prayer, but I would translate your question in another way. I would say we would like to be united with Jesus, because it's the same. It's like you are asking me, okay, I understood that I need to do this act of faith, but now I want to be doing it all the time. How can I reach that level? It's translated in other words, it's how can I be constantly united with Jesus? Because this is the real question, your real question. So the real answer would be, keep doing what you are doing, keep putting this pressure for growth, but also add that great element of humility, which in the sense that we only can do the visible part of the iceberg at a certain point in spiritual life. All what we can do is, like, say 1/7 or 1/10 of the effort, and it's a way to speak. But God in us performs and realizes something that only God can do. So this element of the action of God in us, deep in areas of our being that we cannot access, only He can access them. This is why it's important to understand that purification or transformation is not only our job. We do our part, but it's a small part compared to, and by doing our part, we trigger, or we allow God to work. And then when God starts to work, what He does is a divine work and is needed. He is the builder of the New Jerusalem. He is the builder of the new human being. So what I'm doing is only one, and I'm talking about this act, no? It's this, but all the rest of the iceberg is huge, and He knows what He's doing. He knows at which rhythm. All what we can do is to be faithful to Him on a daily basis, to continue to do what we are doing, and Lexi Divina, Prayer of the Heart, of course, Mass, there's no discussion about that. We have Mass, of course, first and foremost, and also the commitment, the daily commitment during the day to Him and to our brothers and sisters, learning to love. So by doing this, by taking time also for Prayer of the Heart, we allow God, we give Him space to do the main work. At a certain point, His work is fundamental, is needed, and we can't speed that. The only thing we can is to allow it to happen by the quality of our commitment. But once we are committed on a daily basis, of course, it's every day, then He has that space to work. But if the person is giving it full power, I think that in a short time, that transformation can be done, that purification can be achieved by God, not by us. We can't measure, because it's like traveling 100 miles per second, His speed, while our speed is maybe, I don't know, a few inches every 3 months. So it's not comparable at all. This is why it's very needed. So yeah, if any person does what they have to do, allowing that space for God, trust me, God is waiting for that. God wants to realize that job, that work, that deep work. He will do it, and also bearing it, because it's not an easy thing to go through, because it's like removing all what is not God in us. You see, we want that state of union. We want that continuous state. So he has to purify us, prepare us in order to be united with the Lord. He knows it. We don't know really. We only know a few bits, but he sees way deeper in us. So I don't know. I think I hope I sort of answered your question more or less.
Yes. So basically, also what's important also to respect, even if we don't know exactly where we are, but to respect that there are those stages, and that the work also will be done by God, in the sense of, you know, you talked about Padre Pio and saying 34 rosaries a day. It's not the same as someone in a different stage starting to do 34 rosaries of their own accord, if at that moment they're not, no, in a way sort of called or given a grace to do that in the way that he was doing.
You're saying that they're not the same?
No, in the sense that you were saying, okay, if someone is fervent now, that if they're not at that stage where Padre Pio was at that moment to do 34 rosaries, it's not really useful for them to say 34 rosaries, if maybe they're at a stage where they should be saying one properly, or starting to get to know, or
Okay.
and that God, and we should trust that God will lead us to that stage.
Got your question. Yeah, hence the main question, and the most important question at any stage: what am I supposed to do at my stage in order not to delay growth, to be at the same speed with God? See, adjusted. Of course, I can't give an answer like this for all stages. I can't give the only general answer would be too silly to saying, oh, you need to do the will of God. But what is the will of God? The will of God is an immense subject when you come to details, when it comes to details. Now, remember, many years ago, I gave twice a course called Ensuring Steady Growth. Ensuring steady growth. What we want is to be doing all what we can do, not to fall in a huge stress, even a spiritual stress or scruples or any of this, just to do what we are supposed to do, but not less. Because if we are not putting the normal pressure, I call it, forgive me, these are human expressions. If I'm not putting the full pressure, what will happen is that I won't be going with God's speed, especially when we talk about God's speed, is his wings. So imagine the car took off and had now was landed God's wings to fly. It doesn't mean that it will continue to fly, because I could still interfere. My freedom is never taken away at any stage, even after union. My freedom is not taken away. That's very important to know. So at any stage, I still have something to do in order to be in tune, in synergy. It's a Greek theological word, no? To be in tune with God, or in phase with God, you see. So the advice is, I need to know each person, where each person is. I need to know what I'm supposed to do where I am, okay? Because I'm not saying don't do too many, because I don't know what is too many for you. You see?
Which is where the spiritual director, obviously, I guess,
of course, this is the job of spiritual direction. Because what is the job of spiritual direction? Is to apply the theory for the very case and the very moment of the person, this person in life, to adapt, to get to sense where the grace of God is, where the person is in the grace of God, what the grace of God is waiting for this person. you know. Sometimes you can give an advice and then you meet another person, you give almost the opposite advice to another person. Not opposite in the sense of
No, I understand.
sinning, but opposite in the sense of, now you need to let go God work, now you have to do this, you have to do that. So it's so where the person is. If you read, for instance, certain passages of St. John of the Cross, you have the impression that the soul doesn't have to do anything at certain stages. But we are talking about certain stage. This is why it's very dangerous to read any text and say, okay, I'll do that. Yeah, but maybe it's not for you. It was for you, or it will be for you, but it's not for you right now. You see, all the advices, he has a long list of advice just compiled, which are in fact the little pieces of paper he used to write after spiritual direction as a summary, you know. So they're like the prescription of the doctor, no? So he gives a small thing. So all these little prescriptions, we have them and they are listed one after the other. But these are different people, different moments of their life. So you read them, sometimes you can be extremely overwhelmed by saying, oh, I can't do that, I can't do that. But it's not necessarily maybe for you. Or it's not for you right now, you see? So,
no, it's clear.
yeah, so yeah, the adaptation, harmonization of God's right now way of acting in me, the grace of God, the Holy Spirit, and my correspondence to it. How do I correspond to it? How do I match this? This is fundamental. So I'm sorry, I cannot give an answer, but still I wouldn't deprive a person who wants to do, but I said add a bit of humility, add 9/10 of humility in the act, because the 9/10 is left for God. Yeah.
All right.
Unfortunately,
Thank you very
the
much.
answer cannot be. You're most welcome. Okay.